Great. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to this session on the Gatwick drone incident. My name is Andrew Shelley. You'll see that at the bottom of my little screen there, and I'm the moderator for this session. And where most of the sessions at this conference have a panel of speakers, in this session we've got just one. We're actually very fortunate to have Ian Hudson with us all the way from the UK to take us through his investigations and findings related to the Gatwick drone incident. Some of you will be well aware of what that incident was, but some of you will be wondering what actually was the Gatwick drone incident. This occurred in the lead up to Christmas in December 2018, when Gatwick Airport was closed for about 3 days because of drone sightings. The official assumption at the time was that the lights in the sky were industrial, operated with malicious intent. However, those of you who have read the articles that Ian has posted on the Hoover site will have seen that the reality is that there were no drones. I'd also encourage you to visit the AirProx Reality Check website, which has a page on the Gatwick drone incident. On that page, Ian describes the Gatwick incident as the perfect storm of panic, lack of preparation, fear of technology, political pressure on a police force, and clickbait taking precedence over fact-checking. Ian's findings have been so confronting to officialdom in the UK that when he was scheduled to deliver a presentation just like this one at a recent conference, officials intervened and had him uninvited from the conference. But as you'll see, what you hear today from Ian is not speculation. It relies on fact, and to a large part on records that he has obtained under the Freedom of Information Act. Now, for us, this is a New Zealand conference, so the so what from all of this is that the incident has been used as evidence to justify policy and legislation here in New Zealand. For example, when the MOT was doing the drone integration roadshows, people would ask questions as why any reliance was being placed on the discredited Gatwick incident. At the time, the MOT would simply refuse to answer any questions on this. There was no acknowledgement that the facts had been established or even were disputed, and no indication that there would be any change in proposed policy. If we move forward from that, the new Civil Aviation Act, which comes into effect next year, includes a clause criminalising unauthorised entry into controlled and restricted airspace. The logic for this is essentially Gatwick. Documents released under our Official Information Act show that officials believed Gatwick demonstrated that drones could be highly disruptive and have a very large negative economic impact. The problem, as our officials saw it, was that if there was no other aircraft in the vicinity, so there's no danger, then the more serious of the existing legislative provisions would not be triggered. So with that, I'd like to introduce the speaker for this session, who is Ian Hudson. Ian is a software engineer. His interest in drones originated from a passion for creating visually compelling music videos for unsigned bands. So he comes from quite a creative background. And in researching the Gatwick incident, Ian has collaborated with respected journalists. And as such, it's really important to reiterate that point, that Ian is using best practices for investigative journalists. He's ensuring that everything that he states here is actually a documented fact. Now, before we get started here, I'd encourage everyone watching this session live to please send through your questions, particularly through the app or on Zoom if you're watching by that. We'll save them, though, to the end of Ian's presentation. He's got a lot of material to cover, and then we can go through them at the end of that. So with that, Ian, I'd like to hand over to you and welcome to the UAVNZ conference.
So the Gatwick 2018 incident, when an industry pays the cost of burying mistakes, and we've got a slightly comedy picture here, you will see some kind of sarcastic images as we go along, but this isn't too far from the truth in that if you try and get Gatwick evidence, there's very little, and it's very, very difficult to actually get hold of it. And I can use this almost clickbait title, which is true. The talk UK bureaucrats tried to ban. So I tried to do this talk in London in September, and within 2 days of me, about 2 days after putting it on LinkedIn that I was going to be there, I'd basically been cancelled. And actually, I had to sneak in there with Philip Rouse's help. Philip Rouse did the talk, and I filmed it and we put it out there on YouTube. Well, that shouldn't have ever had to happen. And I'm trying to get to the bottom of the complaints up there. So I've used Freedom of Information Act, I've used the Data Protection Act. There are emails talking about me that the government department's trying to stop me ever seeing. So yeah, there's fun and games there that are continuing. So a recap of what happened at Gatwick. So on the 19th of December in 2018, there was a report of a drone or a couple of drones being seen. Now, this is from a security guard. Now, he might have seen a drone, he might not have seen a drone, he might have been mistaken. So at this point, with the evidence that's there, which is very little at this point, because obviously the authorities themselves aren't involved, the media hadn't got there. So all we've got is a security guard. Now, I know a journalist that's interviewed him and said that he comes across as sincere. So as far as I'm concerned, that security guard sincerely thought he'd seen something worth reporting, but whether it's a drone or not, given there's no description, it may not have been. So it may be briefly there was a drone, you know, maybe there was a malicious drone, maybe there was a flyaway, maybe there was no drone at all. So really, for this moment in time, we don't know. But only 20 minutes later, we do know that something doesn't add up, because the National Police Air Service, one of their bases is really close to Gatwick. So as soon as this went on, they scrambled a helicopter. The helicopter's got military-grade optics. So these helicopters are equipped with anything from $250,000 to £1 million worth of electro-optical and the thermal on there. So it can see a drone perfectly fine. It went and flew around to all the locations where people said there was a drone, and it saw nothing. And the good thing about National Police Air Service is a freedom of information, and they've been completely upfront. So, but the difficulty we have in the UK is the pilots in the air are under a different police force. They're under West Yorkshire Force, which is local to me. And this wasn't clear, and the media didn't go and ask them at the time. They asked Sussex Police, who are the police on the ground. So the police on the ground are saying there's a drone. The police in the air never saw a drone, and they're the experts on airspace. So that's your first red flag. So we know members of the press arrived equipped with professional camera equipment. So they've come there, they've got the camera gear, and over that entire period, they didn't see a single malicious drone. They saw helicopters, other air traffic, and the police drones, but they didn't see any Gatwick drone. Now, we know, though, over those hours and days that followed, drones would be reported by the police, ground crew, and the public, and we'll get into why that happened as we go on. So I'll put you at the same time, the press didn't see anything. The National Police Air Service didn't see anything. And importantly as well, there wasn't a single aircraft reported. So that means that no civilian pilot saw a drone either. And counter-drone equipment was deployed by the police and the RAF. And interestingly, the police are still arguing that they deployed counter-drone equipment despite being photographed on the roof using it. Now, will anyone notice it's a helicopter? And this is concerning, and you'll see this kind of theme continue on. One of the first images in the national press of the Gatwick drone was the National Police Service helicopter dispatch from Riddle. So the helicopter that came across to look for the drone suddenly gets photographed. Now, this is a photographer, Eddie Mitchell, very experienced press photographer, and he flies drones. So he knows what a drone looks like. He knows what a helicopter looks like. He got his telephoto lens out, realized that actually what was up in the sky at that point in time was a helicopter. So he does a tweet saying, what's up in the, don't make a mistake of mistaking the helicopter that's up there for a drone. So and he does that photo so we can see it. The pic is the MPAS police hello. And what happens? This is national newspaper in the UK. We have got the drone. They don't even say drone. It's now drones plural. And it's Eddie's photo of a helicopter. And that's, you know, already it's set off the fact that this is the drone and here's the evidence, and we know it's not. Now, while that helicopter's up in the air, there's also a guy, and funnily enough, I think he's from New Zealand. So we've actually got a connection. So he's sat on in an airplane on the runway, I assume, or he's there in the terminal, and he's got his mobile out and he's going, oh, I've spotted the drone. But unfortunately, that isn't the drone. He's seen the helicopter again. But what I didn't realise, but I've gone back. So as part of building the talks, I thought I better just go back and double check what was on social media. It's an issue. I was going back because I thought, I knew at the time I was saying this doesn't add up, and I knew other operators were saying this doesn't add up. I wanted to see the picture, and then I realised that Brendan, you know, at this time he's there working for DJI, he's respected in the industry, and he's in that actual thread on Twitter saying, are you going to use that video on the news and claim it shows a drone? It does not. If you would like to know what the drone industry has done to enhance safety near airports, we will be happy to discuss. So that's the person you should be speaking to. And none of the media spoke to him. They completely ignored him. And it gets worse. There was drone enthusiasts, airspace enthusiasts, all in that Twitter thread. Even putting up the ADSB that shows it's the helicopter. There's your ADSB logs at that time. Media are ignoring it. There's a guy, this bottom left one, he's on Gatwick Airport. He stood there, he's looking up, he's saying it's the helicopter on there. He even puts his GPS position in the tweet. Ignored. So the press continue. Can we have the video? Can we have the video? The guy's now saying we can have the video, but everyone's saying it's a helicopter. Did they care? They didn't care. So you've got here the newspapers all around the world, TV. They can see the thread that's saying it's helicopter. They didn't care. They all wanted the video, and they ran the video as the drone. So that's why that's attack of the clickbait. And what would happen on Twitter? There was, because this was getting silly, we were doing comparisons and memes about the Loch Ness Monster, saying, how can it be that this is going on for so long? There's no video, there's no photos, when there's so many videos of the Loch Ness Monsters. This was done for comedy value. But I just thought it was funny that this exact tweet in the thread, someone's actually made a reference to Loch Ness Monster before it even became a meme. But yes, it's tragic. So the evidence, what evidence? So at the start, Sussex Police tweeted, and really, this isn't a description. It's almost like it's speculation. So they're thinking, well, people are still seeing something from these lights. It must be an industrial drone. So that's what they said first, industrial specification. Then by the time it gets to their debriefs, at the very end of this, it was called Operation Trebor was the police name for it. They had to do a debrief document, and there they referred to it to commercial type drone. So this debrief document that's supposed to be a lessons learned for the entire airport and policing community doesn't have a description. It doesn't say it's a multi-rotor, doesn't say it's fixed wing. It doesn't say anything other than commercial type drone, which is useless. It suggests that no one has actually seen it. So I went on and I asked the Department for Transport, and they've admitted they have no description, and we've seen Sussex Police of their description. So these are the actual freedom of information responses. So so when you see the little train, that's the Department for Transport. We do not hold any information on the description. Clear, we don't have it. I am concerned about this though, because as you'll see later, London Gatwick Airport actually took video of the drone, and they've given it to the DFT. So the DFT have seen it. So they did have a description. What they didn't want to do was tell people they'd got this video on description, because it's not favourable, as you will see. The CAA, they had to be pushed to actually, they just didn't want to answer. Yeah, I won't get fully into that, but you can see it on, there's a site called What Do They Know that tracks the freedom of information, but this was quite a battle. But eventually the CAA said they'd asked their staff as well. So they went beyond freedom of information to a degree. They didn't just look at emails or whatever, they asked the staff as well. And it says none of them believe they are likely to hold information relating to the description of a drone. But then it goes on, the CAA are quite clearly distancing themselves from Gatwick. The CAA are actually based at Gatwick, so they could probably just look out their window and would have known there was a drone, and they could have photographed it. The very fact they have no evidence at all is, additionally damning in this. But it's also concerning that the CAA have continually allowed the Gatwick narrative to shape regulation, and they haven't challenged it. Now, the CAA are kind of lower in the hierarchy than the DFT, so the DFT seem to be pushing that, and the CAA just seem to be, pushed around to say what they're told to say, but they're not really doing the job as a regulator if they can't push back and say, wait a minute, this is nonsense. Or at very least, that this needs challenging, show us the evidence. So the question then comes, so was this the drone just police helicopters. Well, no, it wasn't just police helicopters, so we'll get on to, but this is another, again, important tweet at the moment. Now, this is Malik. He's a BBC cameraman. He works for BBC Look North up in Yorkshire near me. But he's into drones, and he's also aware the police are where to look to see what's going on behind what they're telling you. So you can see straight away, he's looking at the ADSB. He can see the helicopters flying over the airport. So again, this is just important because it was never acknowledged that the helicopters were there and a very capable asset of seeing a drone if it was there. And just the very fact that they're clearly going around the airport looking for it. So it was any light or object that could be misinterpreted. So there's lights on a crane, that's actually documented. Police drones, as you will see later on with the video. Transiting aircraft, that's captured, as we'll see later on in a piece of evidence as well. But interestingly, there was almost a mini Gatwick at East Midlands Airport, which is like in the middle of the UK. And they had about a week long, oh, there's a drone. I did a freedom of information to that. And the police in their investigation admitted that a part of the sightings were transiting aircraft. So people were reporting aircraft that was taking off and landing from the navigation lights. Though, hopefully, though I can't discount it, there were no planets reported. But this is funny because the whole narrative that Sussex police were putting out at the time was, it's police officers seeing it. You can't question it. It's police officers. There was a police officer up in Glasgow, saw a light, I think it was in like the Wimmera or whatever, thought they were being chased by a drone. I think drove around for almost an hour and called for backup, and it was the planet Jupiter they were seeing. So it shows, it doesn't matter who you are, you can mistake something in the sky. Now, here we go. So London Gatwick Airport actually sent video of the drone to partners. But this video was so poor, the DFT staff managing the response kind of expressed how unimpressed they were. So this is Dan. Dan was managing the DFT's response to Gatwick, and he has put, not great. That's not a very good indictment of the evidence, is it? That was for the photo, then comes through the video. Not sure what anyone can do with this. They are working on better quality, apparently. Again, it's not impressed. What is concerning here, actually, is the photo appears to be a still out of the video, and the photo is at high resolution. So it's an indication that somebody has edited the video, exported it at lower quality. So the someone has sat on the original somewhere that could be a bit better quality that would be a little more helpful. I've tried to trace it all the way back. I can't find evidence of anyone having edited it after it's left Gatwick Airport. So it seems to have happened at their end before it's been sent out. Now, none of us here should even be seeing these emails because the DFT fought to prevent these getting out. They even unlawfully tried to deem me as vexatious. You could deem a request as vexatious. So, for example, if I went to a council and said, could you give me your policy if there was a zombie invasion? You could say, don't be daft. You can't put a person. Now, I didn't know that at the time, but there's only 2 people that they've ever tried that on, and both were asking about Gatwick. So I was one of them. The ICO naturally ruled in my favour, but it took 12 months to get to the end. And then the ICO had to order them. So basically the way it works in the UK with freedom of information, we've got, because like in the US, you can personally sue that organisation if they're not answering. In the UK, we have a kind of regulator called the ICO that deal with the freedom of information. And they will decide which part is in the right, which is in the wrong, and tell you how to behave based on that. So they said in this case, you've got to give the email. So that's the only reason we are seeing those. And the video we will look at later. Now, the other concerning thing with this is the video had been shared around and decided that that was the Gatwick drone before it had been shown to the police and before it had been shown to the Ministry of Defence. So what they haven't done is said to the police, were you flying your drones at the same time as this video so we can discount it? No, they've just assumed it was legit. First thing you should do is just check if it's a false positive. Right. So this is interesting. Now, this is evidence. This is the Chief Constable of Sussex Police. He's in front of a Parliamentary Defence Committee being questioned about the Gatwick incident. Now, for comedy value, purely for comedy, I've just put 2 meters on there for gaslighting and nonsense. You can see if you agree or disagree, and we shall see it now. If the volume is not loud enough for you, there are subtitles as well.
One of the most curious parts about it was that there was no filmed imaging at all of the drone, even though so many people thought they'd seen it. Isn't that rather strange that no CCTV system, nobody with a mobile phone camera managed to pick up this device when it was causing such disruption?
I'm not surprised. And when you consider what this looks like and how fast it moves, to try and capture that on anything, I think is fantastically challenging. But Gatwick Airport, I'm looking behind me, is a huge area. It's a huge area, and you try and tell me what a drone half a mile away at the other end of a runway looks like from here. Film it on your best phone that you've got and show me the footage.
So the argument is simply, it's a big area. People only have mobile phones. And also there's the other part here. Well, we'll see. I'll bring up the point and you will see. So they weren't just camera phones. So we had the National Police Air Service with their military grade optical. We then have the RAF that come along that we'll see later in the slides. And they have the Nereo. It's kind of a integrated electro-optical thermal head. So it's like the MPAS stuff, possibly a little bit cleverer than theirs. We had the press with their high-end camera gear. And we know that commercial drones do not fly too fast to film. So he said it's too fast. And this other point is cameras can see further than eyes. His argument was half a mile away, my office can see that this is a drone, but you can't see it with a camera. That's just illogical. Right, the kit that was operated to capture our drones. So no, it was not just cell phones. Interesting here, this is, again, for freedom of information from the Ministry of Defence. So this is what the Ministry of Defence are saying as this is going on. They're saying that their capability is being deployed because it can get high-resolution photos of any drone. And it says that only we can provide. Not entirely true for them to say only we can provide because the National Police Air Service could, but they're probably thinking from ground assets point of view. So, Dwarf to the rescue. So they're all Air Force. The unit is called the Defence Warning and Reporting Flight. Now, the DFT, not DFT, in this case, the RAF have now been very good. Initially, they were being very reluctant to release information, but as we can see from the top, they are just releasing documents now almost without redactions. All they're redacting is people's names and phone numbers and leaving the text there. So unfortunately, by the time they did this, I'd more or less got all the stuff out in the public domain anyway, so it didn't reveal anything new. But it's just nice. With everything that I found out, if I can get a second source, a third source, fourth source, just confirming the same information, more the merrier. So the RAF have confirmed everything that we'd already put out in the public domain here, that they were there. So we're going to look into the system. So the counter-drone system was Leonardo's Falcon Shield, which integrates various sensors, and this includes Metis Skyperion. So that's done by Metis in Lincolnshire. It was quite a well ahead of its time for the RAF sensing, for the RF sensing, which it does. So that's marked on the screen, as you can see now, with the red square, and it's also on the right-hand side. So that's detecting the signal from the drone and signal from transmitter. So that actually puts a location on the drone and the pilot as well. So even if you're not flying DJI gear, they know where the pilot is. You've then got the Nereo electro-optical unit, as you can see there, that's marked. Really cool piece of kit. So that's got a very long zoom lens. It's got the thermal as well. Now, Leonardo are the same company that was picked to do the optical tracking of drones on the Dragonfires, that new development you've seen from the UK that's on the Navy ships that fires the huge laser. It's their technology. And I think Gatwick probably helped them secure that, because the kit does a good job. And we're going to see what it actually does in a second. This is it. And here's your video. This is it. This is it in operating. So the unit itself visually can track from a drone when it can get a good enough image of it. Prior to that, it will use the RF and the radar and use those to assist until it's close enough when it can just use the head unit alone to track. So you can see that's a phantom 1 kilometre away. Perfectly good picture to give the press. That isn't it if there was a drone there. So this is at Gatwick Airport. It's been brought in especially to assist the police. The police have asked for this. So how can the Chief Constable of Sussex Police be sat in Parliament saying he didn't know they had anything better than a camera phone? And you might think, well, maybe he's really senior. Maybe he never got told what the things could do. But unfortunately, he also said this. I was sat with the officers from the RAF as they were operating their system. So he is acknowledging that he has seen this. It's not very good. Again, sat in front of Parliament, we only had camera phones. And then we get on to what else was there. So as we've discussed, we've got the National Police Air Service helicopter. These are the actual logs they provided on freedom of information. So the detailed when each helicopter took off, when it landed. Good thing is here as well, it shows they actually, until the RAF turned up, they kept a consistent cover. So as one helicopter needed to refuel or it's called to another job, they would dispatch another helicopter from another base. So they kept a rolling cover where they could have captured video until the RAF arrived. We know, obviously, Aeroscope was there. The police deny it was there, which is unfortunate because you see on the right-hand side, that's the police on top of Gatwick police station with Aeroscope. We know, obviously, if it wasn't DJI, they wouldn't have picked it up, but it didn't matter because the RAF system would have done. Now, there was a thing called the Gatwick, I think it's got incident log or something, that the DFT held. Now, they made a mistake on freedom of information. Basically, some emails of theirs were asked for, and amongst these, there was a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet was capturing every day what was going on at Gatwick. And the DFT had tried to redact it. And they basically, I'll get onto it later, another slide, but you can get the redactions back. So it reveals that the Home Secretary agreed the use of night fire. Now that is a jammer. So no one even knew, well, they did by one thing. One police officer let it slip at a conference, but he shouldn't have done. But basically, this was the one thing that was a national security secret. They had a jammer. But it's interesting, it was never used, which tells you they never saw a drone clearly enough to use it against, which again, doesn't reflect in a good light. So here, as I mentioned, until the arrival of RAF, there was good coverage maintained. And here you can see on the map, that's Gatwick Airport on the left. That's the base on the right. It's about a 10-minute distance. So that's how close the helicopter assets were. Or admittedly, as I said, though, when they did get sent to another mission, it's come from a base further away. Now, this is the concern here. As we've seen there, the police said, oh, you've got to give us a jammer now. You must approve us to have a jammer. But before the RAF had turned up, they had said, no one is to use kinetic. You've not to shoot it down with a gun, or you've not to use a jammer because there could be collateral damage. So they didn't want to be involved in that. It was against their advice. So it shows the RAF didn't have any command in this. They were purely there to provide information to the police, and the police then decided what to do with it. So basically, the police had overruled them. Now, just by coincidence, a month before Gatwick, the National Police Air Service saw a drone that has been operated beyond visual line of sight by a hobbyist. And what did he do? They had no problem at all following it all the way back and making sure that hobbyist was dealt with in court. So as you can see here, you can zoom in and you can see the heat signature from the motor and from the battery, just as we could with the RAF that we saw a moment ago. So the photographers were the real expert witnesses. So as I've mentioned, the idea that the police officers were inherently capable of identifying objects in the sky is nonsense. Forces have confirmed a lack of drone expertise sent to Gatwick. So there's actually a freedom of information there. So what had happened was they didn't have enough police officers within Sussex Police alone. So they asked for basically reinforcements from other forces. So I asked the forces, did you send along any drone police? Well, back then, there virtually was no drone experts in the police services anyway, because it was new technology. But I asked the question, and they've confirmed, no, we've just sent normal everyday officers. So they're no more equipped to spot a drone in the sky than any member of the public. Some members of the press were drone pilots. Most were suitably equipped to identify objects at range and at night. So this is a quote from one of, I've spoken to actual photographers are there, so I've got actual first-hand witnesses. And one of them had said to me, my ISO is that huge number. I can see a black cat in a coal cellar. Really just saying, I was fully equipped to see that drone day or night. And this is a concerning freedom of information. So what was happening every day was a situation report was being done by each partner. So the DFT was doing a situation report. The Home Office, who were above the police, were doing a situation report. The MOD were doing a situation report. So this was basically just an internal summary of bullet points of what they were doing that day. But then they pasted in what the other departments were doing as well. So we asked the DFT first. So this is, I think this must be the 22nd, talking about the 21st. And the DFT have decided that the drone community, the members of the public, do not need to see these bits that are redacted. They've said this is national security, but it is not, because what you've seen above is the Home Office asked for their report on the same day, and they have made that public. They do not see that as national security. It's not national security. It's literally a record of what happened at that time. So they are saying that basically on the third day, there was a closure of the airport. And I'll just bring this up and then I'll explain from here. So the sightings were at sunset. So we've got no signs of a drone. Suddenly it goes dark. The air traffic turn on their navigation lights. Suddenly, loads of police reporting a drone because they're seeing lights in the sky. They then basically stop taking off. They close the runway down. They divert the flights. There's no aircraft in the sky. And what happens? The sightings stop. So it tells you that the police officers were seeing lights and reporting those as drones. And that's probably why the DFT didn't want to have that out public. I can't see any other reason with that. There's nothing in there that's mentioning any technology or anything that should be considered national security. Right, now you're the exciting bit. If you've not seen it already, this is the video of the Gatwick drone. I'll put it in quotes like that. So that's a 2-second clip. Definitely, unlike the evidence to Parliament, it is not too fast to film. We can all see from that all you would need is a telephoto lens to see that clearly. Now, how come, after this incident's been going on so long, why hasn't somebody been sent to a store to go and buy a whole batch of video cameras to give to staff? That in itself would be incompetence, not to go and equip your staff when you've had a situation going on this long. So, as I've said, it's definitely not too fast to film. On closer inspection, though, it meets the shape of a Matrice M210. Freedom of Information has revealed that just weeks before, Sussex Police had equipped with Matrice M210 drones. So, do we think that maybe that's why the Defence Committee were led to believe no video existed? Because really, it's showing the police drone. To back it up, there's your tweet from the drone team at Sussex Police, 6th of December 2018, showing off their new drone. Now, this is we're going on beyond now from the evidence at Gatwick of just looking at some of the stuff that's come out in Freedom of Information that also sheds a light on why maybe certain things happened. So I'm posing the question here, were Sussex Police too close to London Gatwick to have been critical of them? Now, what I didn't realise at the time, and I don't think much of the press realised, was that the police that are involved at the airport aren't just called and turn up and come along and are part of the wider force. They are actually staff of the airport almost because they are paid for wages, equipment, training, accommodation by the airport. So you're not just a police officer, you're essentially an airport member of staff. You've got a customer-supplier relationship. So after Gatwick, and I can't explain why these are unusually high, but if you look at the amounts that are paid, Sussex Police were paid even more money after Gatwick in the year after that. So they got 13.98 million from London Gatwick Airport. The year after that, we've got 14.61 million, and it actually then goes lower over the following years. So you've got that relationship where I don't see how you could criticise as a police force the airport, because you're essentially criticising your own staff in the mix. We can see at the top here, freedom of information from Sussex Police. It says it's a business arrangement between Gatwick Airport and the Chief Constable of Sussex Police, and it's on a full recovery basis. Interesting, we go down here is the admission that we can see here. This is a letter expressing the concern of how much damage the costs have done to the Sussex Police budget, and saying that they're unable to recover the costs from the airport because it's a criminal incident. Now, if that had been deemed a mistake, the airport would have had to pay that money. The airport might have got in lawyers. There might have been a legal dispute between them both. There would have been a fallout between the police and fallout between the airport. You've got to think, what was the easier option? And let's just remind ourselves of what happened.
Are you even considering the possibility that there may not have been genuine drone sightings in the first place?
Now look how long he thinks about this.
That will always be a possibility, but what we are working with is a range of information from a number of people.
Now, Jason Tingley was a very, very experienced officer, but I'll just cover here what's mentioned in the caption. If Sussex Police had recorded the incident as a mistake, those costs would have been passed on to the airport. So if they say it's a criminal matter, the taxpayer picks up the bill. Taxpayer, seen as having bottomless pockets. Admittedly, it's not quite the taxpayer because it's out of their budget, although the taxpayer has paid for it. But you'll see how this changes in a moment. But otherwise, it'd been the airport. So this officer, after he said that, it was never seen again. He was removed from press duties. Other officers spoke to the press after this. So his admission, and this is an experienced officer that was dealing with the case. He had firearms training experience, the works. This is not somebody that makes a mistake, but he was gone, and this was a criminal matter. Now, so if we skip back, what this actually was now was they had to, again, you would have to maintain that it was a criminal matter and not a mistake, because what Sussex Police decided to do was to go to the Home Office and ask for the national taxpayer to foot the bill. They said this was such an exceptional circumstance. They were in such dire financial condition and it would affect their normal policing now. We want the money. But the Home Office said no. And I think maybe there might be something to that as well, for the fact they said no. Why didn't they think the police had a case?
Are you?
Yeah, skip past that. So next document along. I'm wary I'm going through time on here, so I have to be a little bit quicker. So this is the Operation Tree Board Debrief. So this document took, it was say a year, it was more like 18 months fighting for this to come out. It took the gate couple themselves, it took the press, and it took an MP fighting for this. So this was the debrief at the end, which is supposed to be the lessons learned. And when it did come out, this is what they did. And just notice how it's almost an entirely redacted document. So this is all the things that would be useful information. It's hidden. So it's taking a bit of it's making a bit of a mockery of the freedom of information. And here, I'll put that in slightly for comedy value, to be sarcastic, because it's representing the fact that this document was supposed to be sort of something substantive about what happened. And what it's actually telling us here is the police were not happy with the catering conditions at Gatwick Airport. It's that kind of level of information. The only little snippets you get, they're probably being left in inadvertently. Like there's a sentence above which is seen as a positive thing, and that's why it stayed in. But let's look at it. The investigation was unique and required specific and scientific knowledge about drones and drone operations, which has now been established and should be maintained. So that's an acknowledgement that he didn't have that expertise. So when they're saying our officers are experts in what's going on in the sky, they're specifically saying there, no, they're not, but they will have that capability in future. The one little bit that is a little bit useful is the timeline, but it's not useful because of itself, because they've redacted the useful parts. But if you start taking information from other sources to fill in those, it suddenly starts painting the picture for you. Now, the great thing about Gatwick was obviously then we had social media, we had Twitter. So the likes of Eddie, he was taking photos and he was tweeting them out live. So you can go back and see what was happening at each hour. So he's captured that at the time of these redactions, the RAF were arriving with the Leonardo technology. Leonardo came out after about 4 months, let the, you let it all die down. They let the dust settle. But one of the press publications have put out that it was the Israeli drone dome that was there, and it wasn't. And this meant that the British companies that really did reopen Gatwick weren't getting the sales. So they had enough. And so they went public and did blogs. So it's here. The RAF confirmed to Gatwick Airport operating authorities the absence of any hostile or malicious drone activity. So from the moment you see this, as I put a little soldier icon, from that moment onwards, the RAF is saying there wasn't any drone about. Now, it would have taken some time to set up. So if we look here, so that's certainly the 8:45, chances are it's not operated. 10 o'clock it may or may not be. So those ones could be excusable. This one is definitely not excusable. This is the one we talked about where the lights, you would have seen the lights, the navigation lights come on. And it's interesting here, notice how that's temporary. So the police have said, oh, there's lights in the sky. The RAF have said there isn't anything there. Suddenly the airport reopens. And this is the next piece that I bet the police wish they would have redacted. Because this underlines it. Because it says here, no further suspensions of flying at Gatwick, although sightings of a drone continue. So what they're doing there is they're admitting that passengers were flying in airliners while a drone was being reported, and that was allowed. So that can only mean two things. You either put the lives of people at risk to keep the airport open. That isn't going to happen. Sussex police had signed off for civil liability. They wouldn't allow that to happen. The only other thing you can come to as a conclusion is they knew the sightings were flawed and were ignoring them, and we're now finally listening to the RAF. And this is exclusive for today. This came in this week. This has taken me 4 years to get. So this is the confirmation from Sussex Police for the final sightings. So there was 22nd by a member of the public, 21st, late hours. So again, you can see it's not captured on this timeline. But again, in darkness, the police officer saw what he thought was a drone. But I want to give you an example of why you've got to use freedom of information and bring in other sources of information for a full picture. As we see here, after this, that wasn't the end of the drone being seen. Oh no, because everyone's looking up at the sky and reporting everything. It was actually a day after, on the 23rd, when a crane was reported. Now, that isn't the police there misleading me. It was the fact that it was a neighbouring force. So the hysteria had spread out from just the bounds of Gatwick Airport and had gone into like neighbouring towns and cities. So it spread a little by then. So we've got the Gatwick actions log that I briefly mentioned earlier, and I'll be quick here, but this is just so you can see it. So this is, it was all being recorded on a spreadsheet. And unfortunately, I asked, do you have a shared folder to collect all this information? Say, for example, there was a public inquiry now. How are you going to prove there really was a drone? And they have said to me, no, there's just a spreadsheet, mate. And I don't think that's very good as a response. It means that either they're not being entirely honest with me about what they've got. That would be a criminal offence. If you conceal information that you have for freedom of information, it's up to 6 months in prison. So it's either that or that there is just this. And this is kind of an extension of that. I'm saying, well, surely it was well documented. And unfortunately, it's not. The Gatwick incident appears unique in that it has not demonstrated any transparency, lessons learned, or any evidence of serious record keeping. Just the opposite. Data is actively vanishing. Now, I've actually identified emails being deleted, and I've got a tribunal case. So this is an appeal case. It's going on. There's even been to and fro this week. But because it's an ongoing case, I can't talk about it. Because I was going to show evidence here of how emails have been deleted. But because it's an ongoing thing, I won't do, because otherwise I could get in bother. But I have demonstrated here that that log we were just looking at was only updated until the 21st. The incident went on to the 23rd and beyond. So I've asked, well, surely that's not the latest version. Can I have it? And they've said, no, this is all we hold. The interesting word there is hold. Kind of implies they might have had a more recent one and it's vanished, which again, for an incident of this size, the evidence is vanishing. It's not reassuring. And I wasn't originally going to include this because I don't want to focus on any individuals, and that's why I blurred this out, although many in the drone industry know this, who this is and that. But this is a senior member of the Department for Transport. This person is so senior, they were the conduit between the DFT and government officials, and they left the DFT. It was very late at night. It was 3:20 a.m. I don't know whether they've been celebrating, but they were having a big reminisce, and they put this on to Twitter. If anyone wants to know what really happened, my DMs are open to arrange a pint. I told journalists got in touch. Suddenly, he didn't want that pint and he deleted the tweet, but I'd already archived it before he had. And the concerning thing here, just to show how difficult it is to get information, I said myself, I've been blocked as vexatious, and that had to be reversed. There's another guy randomly, on freedom of information, he'd seen this tweet. He said, can I see this individual's emails? And the DFT unlawfully blocked him as vexatious, said, no, you're not seeing them. I need to go through the same process for the ICO for it to be reversed. But the DFT have just made it that difficult to get to see this individual's emails that nobody's bothered to date. But frankly, there's enough information what we've seen today to paint the picture. So that's the presentation. I don't know if we could squeeze in a few questions, given that's quite long.
Actually, Ian, there are no questions that have come through, so that's actually worked out just fine. But that's really interesting to see the lack of transparency that's been involved with that, the lack of any public lessons learned. Even if it was like, we made a mistake, there's no public accountability that's happening there.
No, and unfortunately in the UK, I don't know how much visibility you see in New Zealand, but we've had a pattern of that. So it's been from everything. There was the Hillsborough football disaster where the families are fighting to this day for transparency. There was then a contaminated blood inquiry. That's going on still. There was then the post office scandal where a computer system made mistakes. And instead of admitting that, they allowed people to be put in prison and knew when they were in prison, they were likely in there wrongly from a mistake. And that's taken, that's still ongoing to uncover. So we have a problem where if a mistake happens within the public sector, people fear about admitting to it and feel that it's better to kind of bury it than address it. And the trouble is, you don't learn lessons. And when you're in the aviation space, but the whole point is, you're supposed to learn lessons for safety. It's especially concerning. And if it happens at Gatwick, it's like, well, when will it happen next? And that's part of the fight, really, of saying we need to put an end to it, because if we don't, it will happen again in future. And I probably should go because we're near the end, but the bit I haven't really covered on this was the fact, which is shown in the timeline, is the police already knew from the RAF before they arrested that couple that they were probably making mistakes. So I'm concerned that there could have been a valid, miscarriage of justice, because if that couple had, say for example, they'd had a week off work, so the employer couldn't have vouched for them. If he'd had a drone that didn't log, the police could have said he was flying it and he couldn't prove otherwise. And that could have been a different outcome.
Right. Well, exactly. And that always is concerning. Right. We'll have to finish this here. So thank you very much for joining us in the middle of the night, the early morning at your time, Ian.
No worries.
It's been really instructive, and I hope everyone's got a lot out of that.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.